Okay, so everyone, welcome to this week's e-learning capacity building seminar. And this week our discussion is going to be on quality assurance for online programs, and there will be a component in there regarding faculty picking up on our conversation that we had last week about faculty development. Our speaker is Dr. Karen Holt. Dr. Karen Holt joined the University of Nevada, Las Vegas School of Nursing in 2019 after retiring from Drexel University as Professor Emerita. Dr. Holt and I have had a long history of working collaboratively, and I was sorry to see her go, but I am maintaining connections with her. She is a recognized international leader and author on online learning, and has written more than 40 articles, has had 1 edited book, and 6 book chapters over her career. Dr. Holt presents nationally and internationally on workload, cognitive load, system-wide quality assurance and assessment, student and faculty development, employee and student recruitment and retention, and equity in the classroom. Dr. Holt has presented nationally and internationally, and this year alone, covering issues in higher education, educational technology, educational neuroscience, translating evidence-informed practice into our daily professional lives through incorporating mind-brain education principles. She's named Distinguished Alumni in 2013 at the University of Texas Medical Branch. She returned to her alma mater as a commencement speaker in 2014, and one of the highlights of her career. She recognizes that as one of the highlights of her career. She is a reviewer for 8 peer-reviewed journals, and her current interests are in the field of educational neuroscience, MBE learning, and looking at the confluence of psychology, neuroscience, and education, translating the most promising research into effective strategies for self-learning, patient teaching, and teaching in general. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Holt.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cornelius. Gosh, that makes me sound quite interesting. So I'd like to hear from that person too. So I'm so honored that you all invited me to share with you today, and I'm anxious to hear more about Cameroon, and if we have time in the end and question and answers, I talk to Dr. Cornelius and kind of get the skinny or the download on what's going on with you all. And before that, it was Dr. Portwood. She and I talked about Cameroon and what you were doing. So I'm excited, and I feel like I've known about this, about what you've been doing with Mabo actually for some years in the past, and I'm just excited to be here. So I hope to share with you some of the things that I have thought you might want to know about and would be helpful for you. So I'm going to just move forward with that. And I really like this picture because what we're talking about is teaching and going online. And what are we really talking about? We can talk about being student-centric, and we can talk about student activities, and we can talk about learning management systems and all the nuts and bolts of how it works. And we'll see from your questions how you want to go. Feel free at any time in the presentation to send me a message through here that you want to know more about this or more about that, and I'm very flexible. Ask your questions while while I'm talking. That'd be just great. Those of you who are listening to the recording, we're sorry that you couldn't be here with us, but you're welcome to email the questions in through Dr. Cornelius, and we'll be glad to give you my take on whatever that was. But distilled down to one thing, what do we do in teaching? It's the art of changing the brain, the human brain. So we give information that's new information, new knowledge, new science, new research, and connect it to what we already know. So you know that definition as being constructivist, right? So take that one step further, and our job as teachers is to figure out what we need to change in the brain. James Zoll is the one who is talking about that framework. And so as we figure out how best to impart this new information, it begins to make new neural pathways in our brain. So I just kind of wanted to give you, that's the framework that we're going from. And then we talk a little a little bit about culture. Obviously, the culture I live in is a little bit different from the culture you live in Cameroon, but it's still, we're taking knowledge acquisition that we've learned about. And I don't want to just give information, just like you don't want to just give information to your students, but we want them to be able to learn about that information and apply it. And sometimes it's in a webinar like we're having, where information and slides are given and then we apply it. And sometimes you can do the learning application or that kinesthetic learner while you are giving information, or while students are discovering that information. And that's in research a very high level of information that gets transferred into what they know, the knowledge that they can then apply. So that ultimately is the goal. So we talk about learners of all stages, and this might be a reminder, but I just wanted to kind of remind us all that we're all learners. I'm a learner, even though you've heard what I've done in my career, but I still consider myself a learner, and I'll go in and out of how much I'm learning about a particular thing, but I always do want to learn, that lifelong learner. And I think that's what makes us good administrators. It also makes us very good faculty members, that we can go between both sides of teaching and learning, whether we're learning how to administrate a particular program, a particular course, a curriculum, or whether we're administrating entire university and all of e-learning. So we have different purposes, and it's really important that we kind of look at what we're trying to do. One goal, just to kind of give you an example, with personalized learning on a grand scale, is to support that lifelong learning to meet the needs of the workplace. So we as administrators have to be clear about what our goals are and where do we want to go. What are the needs of our workplace? Is it just to make money? Is it just to upstart this new curriculum that we've begun, or is it something else? Is it a combination of these things? So be very clear about what that is. You heard my background is in nursing, so of course here's a particular example. In the United States, in 2010, we had a big push towards making all nurses at a bachelor's level information trained and getting a degree. And so many nurses in the United States did not have bachelor's degrees. So that became a goal for the United States. And if you distill that down to the individual nurse, well, there are a lot of nurses that heard that was somebody else's goal, but it wasn't necessarily that nurse's goal. So she'd been working for 20 years and she didn't really want to learn. She didn't really want to get a degree. She didn't feel like she needed it. So, you've got to figure out what the needs of the workplace are and what the needs of the individual are, and somehow level them together. That's the point of this particular slide. So when we move to a personalized learning that's student-centric, it's taking that same example of that nurse manager who really didn't want to go get her degree and showing her. Maybe it's a one-on-one. A faculty member can show her why. Well, here's one difference. If you got your degree, you have to take this course called research methodology, let's say. You didn't have to take that to become a nurse, but you have to take it to get your bachelor's of science degree. So we find ways to integrate why that knowledge about research will help her in her individual environment as a nursing manager. And that indeed is exactly what happened on that particular person. She had trouble getting all of her shifts covered. She was a nurse manager, so she herself was working quite a few nights in a month because she didn't have the nurses who were working the nights for her. So we went to the literature and we did a research quick search and found a couple of articles that talked about different ways that you could schedule things that she had never thought of. She chose the one that she thought she would like to translate into her practice at her unit, tried it for 2 months, and lo and behold, she didn't work any night shifts in the second month. So she decided, oh, well, that's pretty cool. So she enrolled in the next opportunity at the next quarter as it was, and she now has earned not only her BSN, but her MSN, deciding that, oh, education was of value to her personally. So it became not because it was good for the hospital, not because it was good for the community, the United States as a whole, or it met some other goal, but it became good for her. So it really helps everybody if you have buy-in on all three of those levels. So be cognizant of those levels when we're talking to individuals, that they are individuals just like we are, and we need to explain why we think a certain way, or why we're planning a certain way, why we want to customize an environment a certain way. So that's the point of this particular showcase. This particular slide, you'll see that I'm not going to read every single slide to you, but I kind of talk around it. So if you have questions, just raise your hand. Now, I do teach evidence-based practice and research even still. Those are like my favorite things to teach. And so I'm just bringing to your forefront in your mind that there is education and research out there just on things that are specific to COVID-19 and online learning. What are the challenges just because of COVID-19? How do we support academic workloads in online learning? Because you realize that there are very different academic workloads, right? There's some academic workloads for faculty that talk about we're just going to teach this many courses and everybody has to teach this many courses, and maybe we don't take into account how many students are in the class. And obviously how many students are in the class or what level that class is going to have a big impact on what you can do in the course. So bottom line on that, all courses are not created equal, and the academic workload therefore is not created equal. So you have to look at all of those factors that are going into how we support online learning. A lot of factors, and those are pretty much standard now in the literature, and we're going to get into some of those, but it definitely has an impact onto our academic workloads. So then I wanted to kind of show you this slide, and this came from 2017 data from WCET. Those of you who know about WCET, if you don't, it's listed in my resources in one of the bottom slides that you're going to get copies of. If you haven't joined that organization, it's free, but you get so much information on statistical information you can use in presentations like this. It also gives you the answers to some of these questions. So this question was, how prepared do you think college instructors are to teach high quality virtual courses? So we're only talking about online courses. The key word in that question was high quality. So we can all teach virtual courses, but how as administrators do we know what is the quality? What is making a particular course quality course and what is not? So in this particular survey, high school students and college students were asked in the United States, how many of you think your college instructors are well versed? And this was before the pandemic, so the pandemic has nothing to do with it. How many of your instructors are prepared? Not at all, somewhat prepared, and well prepared. And you can see there's a variety of answers between somewhat unprepared and well prepared. By far, the 50% majority, almost 50% if you average, is somewhat prepared. Interestingly, notice that it's the college students, so these people who are already having these professors as teachers, only said 41% of their professors were somewhat prepared. 23%, however, were well prepared. So that puts us over the 50% mark, but not by much. It's only 64%. So that's not really good marks for us. So if the very people we're teaching don't think that we are prepared to teach high quality courses, we could probably change that. How important is their opinion? Well, they're the ones that are receiving our instruction. So is the question that they don't perceive we have the knowledge to teach that particular subject, or is it we don't use the technology like they use the technology, or like they think we should use the technology? So I encourage you to think about all those different aspects when you're thinking about that. But as administrators, one of our jobs is to make sure that our professors have the tools they need to learn how to teach online. We don't take courses on how to teach online when we become professors. We are very good in our discipline, and then we become academicians. So somehow we're missing the piece on how to teach. So I do encourage you to make that part of your your annual faculty evaluations. What are you doing to show that you are learning more about your craft? Your craft is teaching now. So if learning is involved in connecting newly learned knowledge to the knowledge we already have, or older knowledge to structures in the brain, then Teaching is the art of changing the brain. So you saw the one picture that I started off with. Here's the picture of James Zoll's book, where he goes into great detail about teaching is the art of changing the brain. So if you're looking for a good read on your own, this book was published years ago. It's not brand new, but I found it to be transformative in my own thinking. So I share that with you as kind of a break and just giving you figures and facts to say, here's an example of something you can do for yourself that talks about learning how to teach and how do we change the brain. So where is that going to put us in the future of teaching and where we want to go? So think about, what do you want? What is the mission of where you're going to go? And you come up with a plan of how you're going to get there on several levels: personally, professionally, and then where does that lead for the future? Are you on the trajectory that you want to be on? If you're not, now is a good time to make those changes. I personally do that at the end of every semester or quarter that I teach. I'll kind of look at my student evaluations for that particular course, that semester, that quarter, and maybe I'll make some tweaks on the individual courses. Yes, a lot of changes, right? Every semester. I would have to say I'm not the common one. Most people that I know, other professors, will make changes once a year. When you make changes once a year, that actually allows you to see if the changes you make made the difference that you thought they would. So that's actually what's documented in the literature is a really good practice. Once a year, you go through, you look at your courses, you look at your evaluations over several courses, and you decide what you need to change in the particular course. How does that relate to administrators? Well, if you're an administrator, you might look from the program level. So you look at multiple courses, 20 or 30 courses in your program, or maybe you only have 10 courses in a program. And you look from a programmatic level and you look at that evaluation. What one leg of that stool is student evaluations, but that's only one leg, because we're not really, our goal in higher education is not necessarily to make the student or the learner necessarily happy and pleased with their experience. Satisfied would be the word we use in the literature on that aspect. That's only one part of it. The other part is, did the student learn? It might have been uncomfortable to learn. I'm sure if you reflect back on your own learning to get you where you are today, there were some parts of your learning that might not have been as pleasant or as satisfying as others. I can think commonly of those of you who don't like math might tell me that statistics was not a pleasant course for you to take. However, statistics is something that once it's over, you're really glad that you now have that knowledge, because the next time you read that research article in your discipline's journal, you know what that means when it's talking about p-values, and you know what it means when it said it did this particular search and it searched in these databases, because you may see one database that they didn't search in that you know has your discipline's work. Then you would want to go back and repeat that literature search before you move forward. So it's taking a look at where you want to go personally, professionally, and professionally means in academia, but then I'm bringing it forward to Cameroon, or for me, UNLV. Where are you going to go with that particular one? So now when we talk about distance education in particular, so I know that it is always a concern about pricing. So we talk about distance education, and some people in the early stages of online learning, like in the 2000s, 2003, 2005, we surmised that distance education or teaching online would be cheaper because we don't have to have a building. We only had to have an internet connection. We don't have to have faculty come to campus, so we don't have parking passes, or we don't have to buy food at the university, all of those other expenses. But there are other costs that are associated with distance learning that sometimes are hidden or you're not aware of. Like, you don't have to buy the facility and the air conditioning or the heat for your particular building, but you do still have to buy extra software. You have to make sure that the internet is going to work. If the internet is not working, or if we're having brownouts or rolling blackouts, then not only the faculty, but the students also are not going to be able to get online. If they can't get online, what kind of changes do we make? there are some things that we changes that we do make. I remember teaching at a community in Africa some years ago over about a year. And there were some times that the internet would be down for 3 or 4 weeks. So we would just pause the course. And then, because guess what? We couldn't change that. That's the way that was. And then we would resume the course when that particular problem had been solved. And so there was a lot more flexibility in distance education than there is in the face-to-face learning. So you have to account, there's good and there's bad with that. So how do we justify that in terms of our tuition? So Pullen and Strout put together a really good price and cost report that I'm bringing up to you for those of you who are interested in that. And basically their price comparison, just looking at the tuition for face-to-face and distance students when they looked at the extra things that you charge for a distance student, which included, in this comparison, was just tuition. So some universities would charge less and some charged more. You see the majority did charge more for that distance student. I'm going to add something back to that. And when I read that a little more clearly, let me tell you, the tuition more could have been only $34. In fact, in one instance, that accounted for almost 20% of that number was $34 more. So yes, that was more, but the $34 was an online fee that every online student was charged. And that $34 fee in US dollars paid for software, paid for proctoring, it paid for things that the online students received that the face-to-face students did not receive. Other pieces that would speak to that would be sometimes students pay for a health center fee, and if they were a distance student and they did not have the availability to be included in the health center, then they were not charged a health center fee. That's an example. The fitness center fees sometimes were waived for the distance students. So what I found is it's not always the same everywhere. So those are things as administrators that we look at when we're deciding how it's going to be at our university. Look at what other universities have done and then decide how you want your university to go, because there's not one model, there's all kinds of models. So you just make your choice and then you have your reasons for why that worked best for you. This is an abstract. It was published back in 2003, so you can see that it's not up to date, so to speak, but I think it still speaks today. And they're in this particular case study, they talk about faculty workload and how we compensate and how do we measure quality in improving academic quality. So if your goal is to improve the courses that you are currently offering, how do you do that? Do you do that by offering additional compensation to the faculty that you're asking to improve the course? Do you pay for courses that are already developed by, say, publishing companies like Pearson or Francis and Schaeffer, and you use a work that has already been done by those publishers, not always faculty members, although there's usually a faculty member, at least one faculty member on the task force that works additionally for the editors of the publisher so that they can bring in that content expertise, but faculty are not at the helm of those, that the editors are. But that doesn't cost your particular university, and you're trusting that the information coming from the publisher is going to be valid, and you have the advantage of knowing that it's not just one university, but multiple hundreds of universities that are choosing that. So there's value behind those numbers. Those are information points. So you look at faculty workload. Do you give faculty workload download, is what we call it, for developing a course? Do you give them money for developing a course? It's like, what do you have more of? It seems like you either have time or you have money, but you don't have both at the same time, right? So how do you manage that? This particular case study kind of talked about that. They had a 67% response rate, which is really good, right? Out of 182 faculty members. So they did get a lot of faculty to answer the questions. And what they found was that faculty surveyed don't believe that they're fairly compensated, nor do they feel they're getting institutional recognition for their contributors. So what I wanted to tell you in that particular piece, one of the purposes of reading this article was to say, had a lot of people, a lot of faculty responding to this fact, to this survey, and they had two things to say. One, they didn't think they were fairly compensated. This is after the fact, they'd already done the work. So it could be that they didn't understand, or it could be that after they did the work, it was more work than they thought they were going to get. And secondly, that they didn't get the institutional recognition for their contributions. So that is certainly something that we as an institution can do. It's up to us to recognize our faculty contributors. That's something easy for us to do. It does not cost us any money. I did find another article, wasn't as articulate as this one, which is why I showed this one to you, but it said the same thing, and that article was done in 2019. So here we are that many years later, 16 years, and we're still coming up with the same problems. So those are probably things we need to address. VUCA. Has everybody heard the term VUCA? So VUCA has been around since 1987, but I'm beginning to see it more. Beginning to see it more in the literature as a common term again. I first became familiar with this in 1987. It's a term used by the Army War College, which is an academic master's level course to people who are active duty. And VUCA stands for volatility. That's what volatility is, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I see all of those things fitting into online learning. So if I think about, is it a volatile? Yes, we're unpredictable, right? None of us predicted that COVID was going to affect us. Online learning moves relatively fast, and it is turbulent, meaning there's lots of change all the time. And if I look at where online learning was in 2003 and where it is now, it's definitely volatile, okay? It's uncertain. We have frequent disruptive changes where the past is not a very good predictor of the future. It is unfamiliar territory. Think about artificial intelligence and how that relates to the uncertainty of online learning. Think about mobile technology and how many students are learning from their phones. And with that in mind, that has key points into how we design our courses as faculty members. Complexity, it's multiple complex intertwined interdependencies that are confounding what we're doing. So it is not an easy fix. I'm hopefully giving you lots of ideas to think about, and maybe none that you can change right away, but many that you will think about and then put into priorities as to where you want to go, where you want to move forward. The last one gives me the most consternation, and that's ambiguity, because there's little clarity or distinction between our opportunities, our cause and effects. We have multiple perspectives, and it makes it difficult to predict the impacts, given that the cloudiness, the haziness of our reality, because things are changing. We didn't know about the pandemic, not to just keep bringing up the pandemic, but we didn't know how fast technology was going to change. That's another example. Technology changes rather quickly. Your personal environment, what's going on in your country, is e-learning well received, not well received? Is the money to supplement research and supplement learning on the good side or the not so good side right now? And that has to do with VUCA. So I use that term, and it means all of those things. So that is what I try to use when I'm looking at programmatic change or institutional level change. What's the VUCA? So now we're down to resources. So you may have seen this before. This is the Online Learning Quality Scorecard. And the Online Learning Consortium, which is an international group. If you're not a member of the Online Learning Consortium, I encourage you to become a member. There is an institutional fee, but then that allows all the faculty and administrators to access their support. So you have support administratively. These are the 5 characteristics in their support, and all of those with the Online Learning Consortium. The administration of your online programs, they're very different in their questions from how do we offer mental health support? How do we offer COVID support? How do we, or do we even offer this kind of support? What are other people doing? What are the standards? Blended learning programs. So they are also, the Online Learning Consortium has policies, procedures, and helps with webinars and in-services on blended learning. So that's taking students and maybe meeting a certain percentage of your classes is a face-to-face class, and then the rest are online. And that percentage varies. Blended learning just means you have at least 1 or 2 classes that you meet in a classroom face-to-face and the rest online. And it can mean you meet all of your classes face-to-face except for 2, and those 2 are online. So it's a wide variety, and it's up to your institution to define what you use as blended learning. Course design review. So after you build that course, how do you know that it's a quality course? You don't want to have to remodel the course after you've already built it because you spent a lot of hours building it. So what do you look at in terms of course design review? So there's some pillars that we think have shown in research and through student evaluations and through administrative review that are what we call the 9 hallmarks of quality in an online course. And that's what's involved in that course design review. What is quality course teaching? So that piece is targeting faculty members who are actually delivering the courses, creating the courses, and maybe evaluating the courses, as well as administrators. What is it that we're going to call quality at our institution? And how are we going to call it? How are we going to develop it? How are we going to evaluate it? How are we going to disseminate that evaluation so that the next evaluation continually improves? So that's your quality improvement program. And then it has digital courseware for instructional practice. So one of the things I really like about the Online Learning Consortium and your membership in there is they will give you a practice, like, let's say one of the values is that the expectations in the course are clear. So the evaluator might go through and make sure that the expectations or your course objectives are very clear and they can be met and they're upfront, and students and faculty alike know what those objectives are. And then in this digital courseware, it gives you an opportunity to practice. It'll give you some ideas of what is not so clear, what is muddy clear, what's really clear, so that the people who are designing those courses or who are evaluating that courses can be very sure of what it is you're looking for. It's kind of like when you see a really good online course, you just know it's a good online course. How do you intuitively know that? So that unpacks those pieces. What makes it a good course? What are we actually looking at? And then lastly, in blue, the online student support. So if you are a student of an Online Learning Consortium course, you have online student support 24/7. So they have put together bits and pieces. It's not all call on the phone and you get support. Sometimes it's go to the website, you ask your question, and it gives you a help article, just like you do when you go to Apple, right? And then sometimes you make an appointment and actually talk to someone one-on-one. So it's what is a good practice in online learning and what we want you to do in your courses as well. So it's that online support that you have to have when you have an online course, because you're not meeting with the students, you're not seeing the puzzled looks on their faces, or maybe it's something as simple as they can't get their computer to work. So it's all of those pieces that we need to have a successful online course. Here is another example, and I'm for sure that you can't read it. I'm sorry, I just wanted to use the PDF. And I think that Fran told me that you all have been introduced to Quality Matters. So this is the Quality Matters rubric. It's a different organization than the previous one I talked about, the Online Learning Consortium. Quality Matters has a rubric that they first developed in 2003, actually from a FIPSE grant. And they decided that these areas on the left, course overview and introduction, learning objectives, assessment and measurement, instructional materials, learning activities and learner interactions, course technologies, learner support, accessibility and usability were really important things that needed to be in a course. Further, on the far right-hand side, you'll see a number from 1 to 3. The items that are 3 are the items that Quality Matters said are essential. They must be in every single course. And the 1s and 2s, you can see 2 is would be really good to have, and a 1 is, well, this would be nice if you have time. Okay, so I like it that everything is rated and you kind of know what they're thinking is important. So that's just another tool that you can use, just like you use the Online Learning Consortium scorecard. And then we get down to those of us who are administrators, and it's very important that we make money, not lose money, right? So one of the things in online learning, and this is just giving you the what happened in the United States, we looked at interaction, and we have to show that we have interaction, in our case, bi-directional. So it's not just from the faculty to the students. You know, the students just, I mean, the faculty don't just send emails to the students. That's one-way communication, but we need to make sure that the students write the faculty member back, and that there's a two-way communication. It's not just going one way. And that's how we can determine that interaction is truly interaction. So this was an example of an audit that was done in 2017 by the Department of Education, and it found what we called was not regular and substantive interaction. Like just finding out what room number you're meeting in, that's not regular and substantive, but that means there's actually content being spoken about in that conversation. So that's just a reminder that that is absolutely essential that we have. Now I'm down to the resources, which I'm going to share with you, and then I'm going to take some questions from you. But so I'm going to run through these real quick so you'll know where you want to ask me. So I wanted to get this wcet.wiche.edu link to you. That has some free, it's free for you to join WCET. They have some great information and tools. And if you want to get other people's opinion on things, that's a great way to do it. Great blogs. People are very interested in helping each other, who are very interested in learning more about online learning. Tech Variety. This was an ebook that's downloadable for free to any of you by Curtis Bonk. And I do have the link in later that you will get. But he talks about these things, TEC variety, that are the contents that need to be in a course that keep students engaged. So this is talking about motivating students, not just about content, but how do you keep their interest so that they want to keep learning? Well, I let you read that slide, and there's more about that if you download that ebook. We have not talked in this conversation today about open educational resources and courseware, but I really thought that would be a good asset for you all. So I've given you some links of some common open educational resources. Some of them are in the United States, some of them you see are not, and all of them are open educational resources, which means that they are without cost. So they are great places to get rubrics, great places to converse with people, and some of them even have software that you can download and use in your courses. So that's a great link for distance learning. Here's some more for those of you who want to go kind of beyond what do I do to go beyond the expected. I want to go further than that. I've got down what I'm supposed to do, and I don't have any questions about that, but I do want to learn a little bit more. I want to learn how to embed videos. I want to use videos. You have to be aware of the bandwidth on that. That might be a problem. I want to poll people. And I want to, while I'm having my class, I want to know what the students are thinking. In this particular instance, it would be if I sent you a poll and ask you, well, how's it going? Do I need to speed up? Do I need to go slower? What do I need to do to make this a more interesting presentation? And you would use your cell phone and you would tell me the answer to that. And then it would pop up on my screen and I would get that answer without you having to speak. I'm not sure about the infrastructure of your internet, so I took that example out, but that's kind of the purpose of some of these things. These are not necessary. These are what you might have if you had more time. And that is my last slide. So I wanted to give a bit of time for some questions. Let me stop sharing my screen here. You can see me again. And Dana Camery put in the WCET link for you guys. Thanks, Dana. That's awesome.
And the tech variety as well. So very good. So if everybody looks in the chat, you'll see the links are in there. But Dr. Holt's going to be sharing her PowerPoint with us as a handout, right? And you'll be able to access those links and resources there. Fortunately, we did have the Drexel librarian present on open source. And so she started the ball rolling, but this is additional information that really will add to the resources that are available to everyone. And I think that's very important. I'm glad you included that in there. So wanted to open up the floor right now for people to ask questions. If they have any particular questions they'd like to ask Dr. Holt. So one of the things that occurred to me, because I think this is something worth pursuing, one of the things we do in this model, Karen, is we, have our presenter present, usually a lot of information that really serves as a catalyst for discussion that occurs over the remainder of the week. But one of the things that really occurred to me, because I don't know how, what does quality mean to everybody here? What are you looking for? What are the words that you would use to describe quality? What you would be looking at your courses right now? Perhaps people can type that in the chat box so we can get a sense of what that means to everybody. Or you can just grab the mic. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation, Karen. And it's very useful to our context. I was just having, I've been sitting here reflecting on this issue of quality because quality management systems are not part of the routine practice in higher education. What typically happens is that when we go for faculty boards, faculty are expected to talk about students' performance in their courses, to explain the data from their courses on students' performance, and that leads to some decisions. So that is how quality is mostly implemented at the level of the institutions, but they don't have dedicated departments or units for quality management that should actually provide support, because if we are talking about quality management, we want the faculty to be able to receive the kind of support they need. When we have this data collected that shows that quality is not where we want it to be, we want to have the ability to support them to get to those, to push up the indicators to where we want them to be. So that's one of the things that we do not have well established in the day-to-day practice. So when I sit here listening to your presentation, I'm asking, okay, then how could e-learning help that process? Does e-learning offer any shortcut?
Wow, that's a big $1 million question about if we could find a shortcut to developing quality in our online classes, or actually even in our face-to-face classes, right? I'd have to say I don't really think there are shortcuts. I think some of the qualities that we find is over the years of looking at research and doing research to find out what are we developing as qualities. In the United States, we have, in the Department of Education, we have regional accreditors. And each of those regional accreditors can add to what the United States has defined as quality. And each of these regional accreditors has now adopted these things we call hallmarks of quality education. And in online learning, there's 9 of them. So in the United States, we have these 9 hallmarks that are considered marks of quality online education. So for us in the United States, I would have to tell you that's kind of where I go for what is somebody else determining is the quality? Where is my benchmark? What am I supposed to be looking at and measuring? That said, I keep that at the forefront, but in the background is my own individual practice as a faculty member. And in my own individual practice as a faculty member, I'm not going to be at the same place that my colleague sitting right next to me is teaching a same course or a different course. So we're going to be kind of going at that differently, but obviously there has to be some measure of standard that says this is the minimum level that everybody needs to function at. And then anything above that, that's great. So it's a matter of making sure that everybody is very clear about what the expectations are. It doesn't mean that's all you can do, but it means that is what you must do. So I think that is actually key. Even when you don't have an organization within your organization that's charged with quality, it becomes a personal integrity issue. If you know about these hallmarks and you know what you should be doing, that's your goal. And then you share with your fellow faculty members where you got the information and this is what you're doing. And then it becomes a grassroots where you all develop that. And I'd have to say at Drexel, for as long as I was at Drexel, and Fran and Danny can pitch in on this one, that's kind of how it developed it at Drexel. It started at that grassroots faculty level and then eventually got to the point where now you have Dr. Kemery and Dr. Cornelius in dean level positions looking over the quality of online education.
And I think to Mabo's point, like we definitely have structures, right? And what Dr. Holt said was that this has been researched quite a bit, right? So I think we at least have a framework and structure, and that helps guide our practice, I think even more so than quality in a face-to-face format, right? So there's been so much research and conversation about the quality and is there quality in online, that I think that then puts us a bit ahead of our counterparts in face-to-face programs, because they don't have as much research, I think, into the quality of the education that they're providing as well. So I think it's helpful to have that structure walking in.
I think that's really a good point. I think one of the things that I wanted to just circle back to, Dr. Holt mentioned the satisfaction research that was done on faculty, and the faculty didn't feel like they were recognized for the hard work that they've done. And I think an important piece of this is if you catch somebody doing something right, point it out and use it as an example to everybody, and I think that gives them the recognition among their peers, that it demonstrates that, I mean, it really is a pat on the back for a faculty member that their superior recognizes the hard work that they've done and the quality that they've delivered to their students.
That is so true. I can't say that more clearly. And that's why I brought up that research study, that's what we found in 2003. It's what we found again in 2019. And yet those of us who are in positions to be able to announce that to their faculty peers, it's worth so much and it costs us nothing.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Holt, for the presentation. Going through or listening to this presentation makes me feel that there are quality standards that online instructors in the United States follow. I'm a bit wondering if, for example, if you find an instructor doing something wrong, what happens to that instructor? Is he called to attention, asked to revise his course or module or something? While listening to this presentation, I got the impression that students play a great role in assessing the online course themselves, because we had a presentation where students were asked if the thing their instructors are prepared, not prepared, something like that for the online teaching. I would say that that is something that in our Cameroonian context, we really need to look into, because most often students do not have this power to influence the educational system, because it's like whatever the instructors give them is okay. You don't have to complain. In other places, find students complaining. For example, they will tell you, I am spending this amount of money each year, but I don't get what I expect. And that just goes on deaf ears most often. And if changes have to be made to improve quality of teaching and learning, it's not really great. So I'm just wondering that though we are not very versed with the tradition of online teaching and learning, but we are used to the face-to-face classroom culture. And this is where I draw my inspiration from. I'm just imagining that if it happens like this with face-to-face teaching and learning, then how are we going to be able to regulate online teaching and learning in our same context? So maybe we will need an organization that will control the standards. Are you teaching well? Are your objectives clearly stated? Are the students aware of assessment methods and so on and so forth? So that's what I'm thinking about. And the question I ask is, in the United States, what happens if a lecturer or an instructor is not following these standards? Is he dismissed or called to order or whatever? Thank you.
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I'll answer it from a couple of institutions, and then anyone else feel free to add to that. But in 3 institutions that I'm thinking about, it is not a matter of firing a professor, but it's more a matter of coming alongside that professor and asking, here's what I see in your course. It could be done this way instead. Here's my suggestions. Would you be interested in changing it? And 100% of the time, the instructor has been willing to change that and becomes a mentor-mentee relationship. So all around, the professor ends up learning a lot from that relationship with a fellow faculty member. I've seen it also in another way, institutions that are saying going to use Quality Matters, adopting Quality Matters as their standard, then their course would probably not meet that standard. So in order to meet the standard, they have to make changes. So that's the other thing that can produce that change.
That's really good. I will say though, Niente, that faculty have been dismissed if they don't meet the standards, but it's a long process for coaching and helping to develop them, because it is an expectation. That's the job one for a faculty. When you're hired as a faculty, you're expected to teach well, you know, and often, you know, I think I mentioned this last time, is often we hire experts who know the subject matter, but have no experience teaching, because, you know, so we have an obligation to help develop those skills, you know. So we were, you know, so that idea what Dr. Holt was talking about is stepping next to the faculty, you know, coaching, guiding, providing an education opportunity to improve. But the expectation is that eventually they will improve. If they are not willing to do that, then it's a detriment to the students' learning. You cannot have, you know, your primary goal is to educate and educate well. It's the reputation of your institution that, you know, people know, boy, the faculty there are top notch. You know, it's very important to you as an administrator.
And that goes back to Dr. Cornelius and my presentation from the other week, where we talked about supporting faculty, right? Because not everybody's good at everything, right? So there needs to be some sort of support structure so that when faculty are struggling, not with their content, but with how to deliver that content, there's some support or someone they can ask and work through some of those difficulties. Because I ask for help all the time. I do. You know, if you hit a trouble spot, ask for help, and that's really helpful in your culture.
I think I would also add that one of the things that could help us as administrators is to think about quality management as a support system, as opposed to as a punitive system or a system to pick out who is not doing what is supposed to be done. And so if we think about it that way, how do we set up a system that prepares people to succeed, prepares faculty to succeed? That could make it work for us. And then we find ways of motivating these people, because I can assure you that if you did that study in Cameroon, the study that you quoted about satisfaction, about people being receiving the recognition for the input they make, it will be something like 99.99%. So we as administrators have to find ways, I think as Fran said, picking out what somebody is doing well and talking about it, projecting it in a meeting, faculty members would help. But I also think that the administrators can always find things within their system that could make their staff feel encouraged, because it is a problem. Many a time you find people tell you, I don't want to bother. In my own experience as a person, I've heard that from colleagues. Over the years, in my own institution, in other institutions, they say, oh, I don't want to bother. Nobody's going to recognize that. Just do the barest minimum and you go your way. So that would be something that administrators will have to address. How do they provide that kind of support system and the kind of motivation that could keep those who are interested? Because you always have a few who just need a little push to take this, and then you'll have others who need a lot of convincing, but there are always people in the system who are ready to do so much if they just had a little bit of encouragement.
This is Cheryl. I wanted to respond with something that I remember from my experience early on when at Drexel, when we were trying to establish some minimal standards for online courses. And we were trying to develop these, first of all, from the faculty perspective. We wanted to know what the faculty thought was important. And it relates to something about what Veronica has asked about, do we have a checklist for the functionality of online learning? Well, there are some actually. And but we were trying to develop our own at Drexel, and we surveyed the faculty across the entire university. And we could only, it was interesting that only 95% of the faculty agreed that every course needed a syllabus. That stuck in my mind very strongly. So that when you rely only on what faculty consider to be important in any course, including online courses, it's going to result in an uneven standard for there'll be no standard for the university. So I think this is a place where administrators do need to step in to say that when our courses are taught at distance, there will be these things. And actually that can, what Dana was saying earlier, these standards actually can go across and apply to the classroom setting as well. There has to be a syllabus for the course. And so I thought I'd tell you about that experience that I had. It stuck in my mind all this time.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was, I'm glad you brought that up. And it is true that you want to have faculty have input. I think that's essential because it is about working collaboratively. So that piece needs to happen. But the bottom line is, who is ultimately responsible for the quality of a program? Where does, in our colloquialism, we would say, where does the buck stop? I don't know if that has relevance in Cameroon, but who ultimately is responsible, and that would be the administrators, the people who are charged with the oversight. So they're the ones that need to, make the rules with consensus, some consensus, and ensure that they're implemented.
And really, I think when you're starting to develop a program such as online learning, faculty are not going to be experts. Faculty are going to be seeking guidance from their administrators. And that's a function. It's not just of administration. It's not just, it's facilitation. It's what administrators do is not all, if you will, enforcement of existing rule, making rules and enforcing them, but it's also facilitation of the processes of education. And one of those is faculty development. And it's essential when we're getting started in something such as we're discussing here. So yes, administration plays an important role. Faculty do, but faculty will be looking to the experts in their organization for direction and guidance and development.
And also, as Dr. Holt mentioned, the evidence, the research, and how research, and there's considerable research on quality of online, the mind-brain learning and everything that can help inform what you choose to implement in your organization, so I think that that's very important. While we are here at a little bit after 12, I wanted to ask if anybody has any burning question that they would like to ask Dr. Holt while she's still here.
Well, it's definitely a very interesting topic, and one that most definitely should be central to, particularly in online learning, where a lot of things are very difficult to control, and therefore you want to be very sure, because especially in the context of Cameroon, where we are still struggling to imbibe the process of online learning. So yeah, very, very interesting topic. And Mapo touched there on the issue of, quality and not, assurance, or not being a kind of a punitive measure, but rather a way to ensure that faculty are doing the right thing. But I wonder whether, it seems to me like it's about the faculty here, but one would wonder whether you can look at this from the side of the students as well, in terms of, quality assurance. And, Drexel has a very nice yearly program, and I attended it once on, assessment and all of that. And the sessions are quite good, because talk a lot about how we can bring quality into assessment, So, but on the part of the students, it's often about the faculty and, having to do what is right to make it right. But I think the quality has to go both ways as well. How do we ensure in an online environment the quality from the side of the student? I wonder if we could draw from some experiences that Mr. Kathleen can share.
I think it's an excellent point, Leke, and I think one of the things that I'd like to close with is the notion that student input and feedback on the quality of instruction received is very important, but it is only one piece of the puzzle. So that's where having peer evaluations, having administrators, observe the teaching as well as the peers coming in and helping support the faculty build their teaching excellence. So there's a lot of different things to look at do the evaluation of the quality of a program. So, but student input is important, but that's not the only piece to look at. So I'd like to discuss this more in our discussion forum this week, as we've run out of time, and I know your time is valuable. And I want to wrap this up and thank Dr. Holt for spending time with us. And if you have, as she invited you very generously, that if you have follow-up questions with her, please let me know, and she will be in connection with you and respond. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.